Good evening. How is everyone? So glad to see you all this evening. And welcome to the Enoch Pratt Free Library. My name is Vivian Fisher, and I am Deputy Chief of the Pratt Library's State Library Resource Center Public Service Departments here at the library. However, before I begin the introductions for our guests, I want to remind you that we have a few housekeeping items that we should discuss. And most of you have gotten a Compass newsletter, and you may know or you may not know that we're going to have several great programs coming up in February. Billy D. Williams will be here on February the 16th, and Joy Ann Reed will be here on February the 24th. Now, books for this evening's program, of course, you don't have to purchase them because you got them all free, but she will be doing personalization signing outside. We have 2 mics on each side of the auditorium for the Q&A. So we have about a 45-minute presentation and then 15 minutes for Q&A. That said, I am pleased to introduce our guests, Ayesha Rascoe and Juana Summers. Ayesha Rascoe is a journalist and the host of NPR's Weekend Edition, Sunday, and weekend episodes of Up First. Prior to her role as host, Rascoe was a White House correspondent. She covered 3 presidential administrations, including the Obama White House. As part of the White House team, she was also a regular on the NPR Politics podcast. Before joining NPR, Rascoe spent the first decade of her career at Reuters, rising from a news assistant to an energy reporter to eventually covering the White House. She covered some of the biggest energy and environmental stories of the past decade, including the 2010 BP oil spill. She is a proud graduate at Howard University. Yeah, Howard. And she has also appeared on Washington Week, Meet the Press, CNN, and MSNBC. Juana Summers is a co-host of NPR's All Things Considered, alongside Alisa Chang, Ari Shapiro, and Mary Louise Kelly. She joined All Things Considered in June 2022. Summers previously spent more than a decade covering national politics, most recently as NPR's political correspondent, covering race, justice, and politics. She covered the 2012, 2016, and 2020 presidential elections and has also previously covered Congress for NPR. Her work has appeared in a variety of publications across multiple platforms, including Politico, CNN, Mashable, and the Associated Press. In 2016, Summers was a fellow at the Georgetown University Institute of Politics and Public Service. Please join me in welcoming Ayesha Rascoe and Juana Summers to the Pratt Library in Baltimore to discuss HBCU Made, a celebration of the Black college experience.
I just first want to welcome you to Baltimore. We are so glad to have you back. I know you were here about a year ago for an event with our member station, WYPR, to celebrate a big event for them. So we're glad to have you back.
I love Baltimore. I love to be out here. So I'm glad to be here on a Wednesday night.
Yes. And I just want to point out, she has brought the best shoes for a Wednesday night that I have ever seen.
I got to
dress up for Baltimore. So I want to start this conversation about HBCU Made by talking about a thing that I know about you because I know you, and we all know about you because you talk about it all the time.
Yes.
And that is about the fact that you are a proud alumna of Howard University.
Yes.
But what I did not know when I read this book, we know that you're from Durham, North Carolina, and when you were first, we have Durham in the house. There we go. You were thinking about, not about Howard at first, but getting out of Durham, getting out of North Carolina, being somewhere different.
Out of North Carolina. That was my goal.
Out of North Carolina.
Yes. I wanted to get out. I just was at this point in my life where, in my life, I was, a kid, but I felt like I wanted to be able to get out and really try to figure out who I was outside of North Carolina. I was very shy. I didn't have a lot of friends.
Couldn't tell.
Oh yeah, I was extremely shy, extremely introverted. And so for me, I wanted to be able to figure out, who am I in a place where nobody really knows me? I haven't been defined. I felt like there was more for me. And so, so that's what happened. I ended up, leaving the nest and going out to DC.
All right, you've got to connect the dots from us, from being that young woman with that urge to leave, to define herself. How did that lead you to Washington and to Howard? Tell us the story.
So, I didn't know where I wanted to go. I applied to UNC Chapel Hill, but that was too close to home. Then I applied to Ithaca. Now, I don't know why I applied to Ithaca. That didn't really make a lot of sense. But I did. I don't think that would have worked out very well for me. But then I decided, so I applied to Howard. The reason why I applied to Howard was Howard had a journalism program. It was in DC. It felt like it was this really cool place. It felt like it had this sophistication, and it felt like it was a place where if I could make it there, I could make it anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so, but I didn't know whether I really wanted to go. I had never been to DC. I had never been to Howard. And then we went to a visit. And when I stepped on the campus, stepped on the yard, I felt like this was a place that I wanted to be my home. Even if it wasn't my home already, I wanted it to be a place where I felt like I was at home. And so I was like, this is where I want to go.
And this book that you have put together, this is a celebration of the Black college experience. So I'm going to ask you what is probably a hard question, because I know those years from knowing you and others who went to Howard, they were magical. Can you maybe tell us the story of one experience you had there that was transformative for you?
Oh, is that the hard question? I thought you were going to say something like horrible that happened.
You got to narrow it down to one.
Narrow it down to one. I think that there are so many instances. I think that for me, a big thing was being working on the school newspaper. And so that pretty much became my entire life. I was there by my junior and senior year. It was daily. So we were going 5 days a week. We were the only Black college newspaper that was daily. And so it was all consuming, and I became editor-in-chief. And so what I would say was transformative about that is I became editor-in-chief. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I couldn't lead anybody, and I felt like I was totally unprepared. But I did it. I survived it. And I think the lesson in that was that even when you take on something and you feel so unprepared, you feel like you're not ready, like you can do so much more than you realize. And so the things that I learned in those years, the seeds that were planted, are the fruit that you see now. So the Ayesha Rascoe that you see now, those seeds were planted back at Howard University.
So I'm going to broaden out the conversation from Howard in a moment, I promise. But I do want to ask you, because one of the things that so many of these essays touched on is the important relationships and social bonds that are made through the HBCU experience. So I want to ask you, is there a person or a relationship that you think was just tantamount to your success and for Howard being so meaningful to you?
Yeah, so I had very deep friendships, obviously, my best friend Keisha and Dallas, and, people that I'm still so close to now from the hilltop. But, also I had a lot of mentors that I feel really shaped me. Yannick Rice Lamb, who was the she was the professor who was the faculty advisor for the newspaper. And so many times I would go to her and just say, look, these people and the administration, they are mad at me. They don't like what we're reporting, and I'm having to stand up to them, and it's really hard. And she would say, I'm proud of you. You did the right thing. And, basically to keep going. And that meant a lot to me. And so I think that relationship, Professor Dixon, who was over the journalism program at that time, I was also in his office all the time complaining about the staff and all of those things. And, it was just having someone to bounce off of, your thoughts, and also to have people that understood you culturally, understood the language that they spoke, the way that they spoke. It was something that I could understand. It sounded like my uncles and my aunts, and having that connection, it was something that it really helped me, and I think really guided me.
One of the things that I loved about this collection is that it includes such a diversity of HBCU alums who have fierce pride and love for these institutions, the roles they played in their upbringing, the roles they play in their lives now. Take us behind the scenes. How did this collection came together? You pulled together an incredible set of collaborators.
It was a lot of work, I tell you. Sometimes I say, I don't know if I do another anthology. It was a lot of begging, a lot of pleading. I really did have to edit this, and, I really did have to email, and every single essay that's in this book is, the result of me kind of begging and pleading, for them to do it. But when I was pulling it together, what I really wanted was a broad range of experiences and a broad range of HBCUs, because there are around 100 HBCUs in this country. It's not just your Howards. It's not just your Morgan States. It's a lot of HBCUs that people may not have heard of. And so I wanted to get both those big schools that everyone's kind of, hears about all the time, and some of those that are not always recognized. So, we have the Dillards and the Talladegas, and we do have, Morgan State represented by April Ryan. I wanted clap it up for April Ryan. So we have that, and I wanted different generations. So, some of the generations that are a little more seasoned, and then we have the youngest person in the book just graduated in 2021, and he was from Brandon Gilpin from Morehouse. So, I wanted a wide range of experiences, and, people who, some first generation, some, their parents were professors. I feel like we were able to accomplish that.
I mean, I think one thing that's important for us to keep in mind is the history as to why HBCUs existed in the first place. The fact that these are institutions that began really as a product of exclusion of people like ourselves. And now over time, they have come into these rich cultural institutions. It's a place and a space that we choose for ourselves that matter and hold so much meaning. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think that it's always interesting, and this kind of came up last night when I was doing a book event, but these HBCUs were founded to educate free Black people, right? Some of them were founded before the Civil War, some, many directly afterwards, but it was all about educating free Black people, but it was never exclusionary, right? You could always be a white person going to an HBCU, which I think is kind of interesting because when you look at now, Black people were kept out of other institutions, but we did not shut people out of our institutions. And so I think that's an important point to keep in mind. I also think that when you look at what HBCUs have been able to do, even though they've been chronically underfunded and have had to endure all of those things that this society has done to people of color, I think what you see is that they have created a space and a safe haven where you can nurture Black talent. And where it is not unusual to be a Black person who cares and who is passionate about your work, and you don't have to defend yourself and say, defend your own humanity. And I think that having that space where you can just be free to be yourself is really, I think, one of the main driving factors of why HBCUs are so important.
One thing that I found interesting as I think about my own experience growing up, right? No one ever suggested to me growing up that an HBCU might be a place that fits. I went to a PWI, a predominantly white institution.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I was feeling a little nervous right here. Thank you for letting me share that with y'all. It's been resting heavy on my heart. But the fact is, nobody suggested that a Howard or a Morgan or any of the other schools that are represented in your book might be a place. And I have peers who are in the same boat. In the book, there are schools of people who, they bleed HBCU, their grandparents, their parents went, their nieces, their nephews, or there are folks like me, or there are folks who had never heard of one before, and a series of life events led them to end up in HBCU. Why do you think that is, that still in some cases and places, people don't make the suggestion that an HBCU is a place that a kid who's looking to find themselves might find home and might find a place to be nurtured and grow?
I think a lot of it depends on where you grow up at. I mean, in North Carolina, there's a HBCU every, 5 steps.
Yeah.
So it makes a big difference. But I also think that, there are ebbs and flows, with the popularity of HBCUs. And there have been times where people in the past would kind of say, well, maybe you don't want to go to an HBCU. That's not because it's not real life experience. It's not going to be like the real world. I think what you see in this book is a counter argument to that, because you see the diversity of the HBCU experience, that it is not monolithic, that you meet all sorts of people go to HBCUs, people who, some are in Martha's Vineyard, people who are, as I said, first generation college students, people from all over the world, from the continent of Africa, from the Caribbean. There is not just one HBCU experience. And also, there's a very funny story from Lauren Ellis, who does a lot of special effects and all the big movies that you watch, like Aquaman. And she talks about being at Hampton and on her very first day running into her first Black Republican. And so there's all sorts of people on HBCU campuses. And so I think that, this book is a counter argument to the idea that they're not diverse. But I also think you have these moments where they get much more popular, where you have Beachella, you have, Beyonce celebrating the Black college experience. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I think, when you had A Different World, so many people in this book reference a different world, right? when you have, say, Deion Sanders going to Jackson State, all of these is when you have a Kamala Harris in the White House, right? A Howard graduate, like that makes a difference. So I think there are kind of ebbs and flows. I think right now HBCUs are rightfully, experiencing some resurgence. And I think it's because, you have these different things in pop culture that bring more attention to them.
All right, let's dig into some of these essays. And I want to start with one where I learned something about someone that I've covered for some time, yet I didn't know this. I want to talk about Stacy Abrams' essay. She is, of course, the civil rights and voting rights crusader who ran for governor of Georgia. And she talked so beautifully about her experience at Spellman. She described it as transformative, as something that shaped the trajectory of her life. And despite all that we know about her and all that we've seen in the press, the way that she talked about that experience was different than anything I'd heard her say before. Can you talk a little bit about that essay?
Stacey Abrams, has a beautiful essay. And she talks about, what stood out to me in that essay was she talks about how going to Spellman, it really shaped her advocacy. It's not that she wouldn't have been an activist otherwise, because she comes from a family and a history where that was very present. But she talks about how being at Spellman, it wasn't just that she was, politically active, but that she was given guidance, that it was shaped. She talks about going into the board of trustees meeting, storming it in her jeans, and that they sat her down and allowed her to talk and say her piece. Right. She talked about, it was a professor at Spellman who first told her to start going to city council meetings because she was concerned, why were there so many liquor stores and, places like that near the school, near Spellman, instead of places that were more uplifting. And so you see like how she gets the start of her political career. She even ran for first political office, was at Spellman. She ran for, I believe, freshman class secretary. She was unopposed, but it was her first one.
Still
and first. And you get some, but you also get some fun stuff like her, talking, her father was concerned about the curfew and whether the girls would be allowed out of their dorm or to have members of the opposite sex in their dorms. And it was Dr. Jonetta Cole, who was over Spellman at the time, who told her father, who basically argued with him that, no, we are going to give these girls some freedom. And so it's interesting things like that. It was a very fun essay. I love that essay.
The other thing that I loved about that essay, and I wonder if this rings true for you in your experience, is she described the promise of Spellman. I think she put it as that it was a chance to change the world. And that just seemed so powerful to me when I read it.
Yeah, and you get that sense in a lot of the essays, but there is such a rich legacy. And that when you go to these schools, you feel, I would say, the weight of history, but it's not necessarily a weight that I would say weighs you down, but it can push you forward. And it can make you feel like if they could do it, if they could walk these grounds and they could do something with their lives that was so meaningful, maybe I can too. And I think that you saw that in her essay and in others, where you can see that it's something that can propel you.
I want to talk about another essay now, and we've brought up April Ryan before, so I want to call out her essay.
Yes.
She is, of course, our sister, our colleague, our friend who hails from Morgan State University, and her essay was so incredible. And one of the things that she wrote is that an HBCU, that Morgan State, the HBCUs love you to success.
Yes, and that's her phrase. It's trademarks. Make sure you know it's trademarks. That's her. I'm gonna give April her credit. That's her.
That's her.
Phrase. Yeah,
and it's such a great thing. This idea that they cradle you, they cultivate you, they help you grow into the adult, to the woman or man or person that you aspire to be. Can you talk a little bit about that feeling? Because people in this book, April and others, they describe hard times where they are pushed to be their best selves.
Yeah. I think that that's one of the things that I found like a through line in these essays is this idea of community. And you see it, in April's essay, she grew up on the campus. Her mother worked at Morgan before she got a degree there, and so you see like her growing up there and getting her start on Morgan's campus, in radio. You also see in another person who went to Spellman, Tendayi Kumba, who is a Broadway dancer. She talks about how while she was at Spellman, she got into a very critical accident, and she did not know whether she would ever dance again. But it was the Spellman community that really rallied around her and pushed, and now she's on Broadway. And so you see these stories over and over again of the meaning of community, and that it goes beyond just you being a student or a number on the campus, but it's really a family.
The other thing that I think is a really incredible through line in these essays is the fact that everyone who wrote an essay, yourself included, very much clearly loves this tradition, loves the places that they grew up. But there's also a string of accountability here of holding these institutions to account when they fall short. And I'm thinking specifically about Michael Arsenault's essay here, which was incredible. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, Michael Arsenault, who also went to Howard University and is a New York Times bestselling author. But he is a Black gay man, and he talks about his experience. And it was important that for me that I had someone from the LGBTQIA community to talk about their experience on an HBCU campus. And I should also say that as a journalist, I never wanted this book to be fluff. I never wanted it to just be PR. I feel like if you love something, if you love an institution, that you should hold it accountable, that you should push it to be everything that it can be. And so in Michael's essay, he talks about a complicated love for Howard because he doesn't feel that Howard always loved him completely as a gay man, and that he faced homophobia on campus. And he talks about other HBCU campuses where there were incidents and attacks rooted in homophobia. And he talks about how he hopes that one day that these institutions can love him fully and completely as much as he loves these institutions. And I felt like that's important, right? Like I wanted to be sure that when we're talking about HBCUs, they're not perfect, right? They are beautiful places where you can grow and learn, but like every other institution, they're not infallible. And I think part of loving them is pushing them to be the best that they can be.
As I'm looking out at this audience, I'm sure that there's at least one or two people out there who might have a young person in their life, whether it's their child, their grandchild, a niece or a nephew, who's going through that process of figuring out where they're going to go to college. And I can attest from what is going on in my house right now that it is quite grueling.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who is considering whether or not an HBCU might be the right space or right place for them, or is trying to help a young person make that decision?
Well, I would say, I think that the college that you go to is a very personal decision. Like it's not something where I think you just, I don't think that every single person has to go to an HBCU. I don't think that HBCUs are designed to educate every single person. But what I think and what I hope this book can do is to be a testament to, if you have not considered an HBCU, that an HBCU might be a place for you, right? Like it's a testament to how HBCUs have made the world a better place and continue to make the world a better place. And so what I would hope is that as you're looking at your schools, that you would, maybe put an HBCU in the number and, look at what they have, look at their programs, look at what they offer, and see, could this be the place for you? Could this be the place where you would feel at home, where you would feel safe, where you would feel nurtured? And to look at all the people who have gone to HBCUs and say, well, that could be me. I could be Ayesha Rascoe. I could be Oprah Winfrey. I could be April Ryan. And better yet, my name will be a name that people will say, I could be her. I could be him. I could be them. I think that's what you want, is to see like this, I could do something for myself and I could really become the best that I could be. And so I hope that this book just puts HBCUs in the number, of the consideration.
What surprised you when you were going through and editing all of these incredible essays? Was there anything that jumped out that surprised you, or maybe that you learned through reading through and immersing yourself in these diverse experiences?
I was surprised at how much overlap there was because, these are people who don't know each other necessarily from different generations. And yet, like I said, seeing these stories of community, seeing these stories of redemption, oftentimes, and Roy Wood Jr. has a great essay that really, to me, set the tone for that because he talks about, Roy Wood Jr., the comedian. He talks about how he got in trouble while he was at FAMU, and he actually, he got arrested, he got suspended for a semester, and he had to go to FAMU professors individually, and he had to ask them for a second chance. And he got that second chance. And now, we see him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and at the Emmys. But part of that happened because he was given a second chance by FAMU. And you see other stories like this in this book where you see students who maybe weren't the best students and they had to go and maybe do some remedial classes at their HBCU, but they did it with the knowledge that basically the HBCU took a chance on them. Marquise Brown, one of the stories in here, he talks about how Hampton took a chance on him. He wasn't the greatest student because of issues when he was in high school, but then when he got to Hampton and saw a Black mathematician, a Black male mathematician was his tutor. And he was tutored and he didn't feel judged. He didn't feel like he was, letting his race down. He felt like he could just do the work. And then he also saw the possibility. So then he ends up graduating from Hampton with honors, right? And so I think so many times you see how HBCUs can pour into students and bring out of them, even though other institutions may not have picked them up, right? They pick up students who maybe other institutions wouldn't. And I think you see the benefit of that as well.
Well, and there's also this beautiful strain in the story that you were just talking about from Marquise and others of mentorship, of role modeling, of seeing people who look like you doing the things that you may aspire to do at some point in your future, and being able to see that this isn't just something that I see on the screen. This is a living, breathing person across this table from me doing this very thing. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the mentorship that runs through this book.
Yeah, I mean, you see that having people who look like you, but who can also understand where you're coming from, right? Who speak the same language as you, because we're in journalism, we're on the radio. We know that language can be an issue, right? There can be barriers, right? And I think that having someone who can understand where you're coming from, even though we're all very different and unique, we see over and over again how it makes a difference. It made a difference in my life. It made a difference in my college experience. And so you see how having people to look up to, we have Branford Marsalis, the great legendary jazz musician who went to Southern because he wanted to be in the marching band. And he talks about, learning like the marching style and all these things. I mean, this is where he could have went to Juilliard. He could have went to all these other places, but he said, no, I want to go to Southern. I want to learn this style. And he says it's all about the culture.
I think one thing I would love it if you could talk about is the HBCU experience as an alum, because I mean, I noticed all of these great Morgan State colors out here. I know how proud you are of your HBCU lineage. It is remarkable to me as someone who did not attend HBCU, the fact of how enduring these bonds are. You've collected stories from people. This is an intergenerational conversation within this book, who still feel such pride and such attachment to that experience.
I think it goes back to what we talked about with the idea of community, and that it's that you don't feel like just a number. And I also think that there are ties that bind that aren't just, even though I went to Howard, But if you just went to an HBCU, like that's a tie that, that's a tie that binds, right? Like, I think there's just a pride in having gone to an historically Black college, even if you didn't go to the exact same one. Now, I think Howard is the best. That's just me.
We all know
That's just me. But, we respect everybody else. But no, I think that, what you see is there is a pride, not only because these are institutions that have survived and have stood the test of time in a country that has not loved us, that has not sheltered us, and that has not protected us. And so we have seen these institutions be a place for us. And so I think that that's just always going to be special, right?
All right. Well, I cannot let you off of the stage without asking you about Oprah's essay.
Oh,
in
yes.
This book. You gotta
Yes.
talk about that one. She holds
Yes.
a special place here in Baltimore too, of course.
Yes. Oh, exactly. Yes. No, first of all, if you can get Oprah in your book, you should. I think that's always a good thing. And I think what I love about her essay, which is it's adapted from the speech that she gave to Tennessee State. She's a Tennessee State alum. She actually did not graduate on time. She was one credit short. She ended up getting her last credit when she was already, on the Oprah show. I think she used some of the Oprah show to get that last credit. You talk about mentorship. It was a professor at Tennessee State who convinced her and her father, to allow her to take her first TV job. Because she was afraid, and she said she did not think her father would allow her to take the job. And it was the professor who heard about this who said, child, this is why you go to college. This is why you go to school, to get a job like this. Let me talk to your father. And so he did, and the rest is history. What I love about that essay and the fact that, it was delivered, it was her talking to Tennessee State graduates and in a commencement speech, is that you see, like we talked about, the intergenerational conversation, because she's talking to people who just graduated last year, right? So it's, we don't know who is in that crowd who will be talking about 25 years from now, right? And so what I always try to say is that HBCUs are not just about history, right? Like, they're not just something that happened in the past, but history is being made today, right? Like, they are still doing the work, and they are still, putting people out who will be leaders of tomorrow.
When I was reading the book, I can't help but think about the moment in history that we are living right now, where we are having so many debates, as you and I both know from all the years we spent covering politics, about who gets to tell history and whose version of history is told and taught, and where HBCUs sit in the middle of some of these debates. How are you thinking about that?
I think that, we're at this point where even the idea of diversity is looked at as some sort of it's become this negative word. So even just a Black person being in a position is viewed as DEI. If you Black, look at this DEI, and it's a problem, and it's not applied, in any other sense. I think that we are at a point where the idea of diversity is being is under attack. And the fact that this nation is not monolithic and that there are different experiences is something that is being challenged, because when you see and you look at this country as it is, and you realize that it is not just a white nation, right? Like, to tell the story of Black people, to tell the story of brown people, that's to tell the true story of this country. But not everybody wants to hear a full story. And they look at a full story as almost an attack on what they feel like is their history, their legacy, or what they feel like is the foundation of this country. And so I think that HBCUs, as always, can stand in the gap. But I think, there also has to be a concern that HBCUs could also be under attack. That because they can be looked at as a place of quote unquote segregation. So I think that you have to be on guard for that as well. But I think that what HBCUs also offer is the context that this is not new. This is not a new fight. These are not, this is not a new thing in this country, that these fights have happened over and over again. These sorts of backlashes, these sorts of fights against seeing, people like a multiracial country, like that has been there, right? Like that context is there. And so I think that that's something that HBCUs can provide, is the fact that this is not new, that this is something that has happened over and over again and will continue to happen until it's fully addressed.
All right, I've got a couple lightning round questions for you before we get to this audience. I'm sure they've got lots of questions for you. Favorite HBCU memory?
Oh my goodness, so many. Favorite HBCU. I loved homecomings. I love, being at Yard Fest and seeing, back, this will be how old I was, but like Nelly was the big person one year. We did see, now this was before he went, way before he went all the way off, Kanye West, this is when he was just started. It was before he started all this other stuff. Young Jeezy, he was Young Jeezy then.
Young Jeezy.
It was, that was big. I love that, doing the, seeing the step shows was always fun. So all of that, like the homecoming experience, really just like being able to like hang out with my friends on the yard when it was like springtime, the weather's good, everybody's out looking at each other, like you can't compare to that. So I love that.
Favorite HBCU meal? And I did learn something about you from listening to your conversation with our colleague Brittany Lou. So I'm gonna roast you for a minute. This one doesn't like sides.
No, I don't like the sides.
No side dishes.
No, I don't. I'm not big on the sides. So no greens and collard greens and stuff
and
like that.
And yet you're from North Carolina.
I know, but I'm from
confused.
North Carolina. Yes. So my favorite, I love my HBCU meal. So the fried chicken. We would have fried chicken on Thursdays, Soul Food Thursdays. I did love the fried chicken. And then this wasn't at the HBCU, but China Wonder was there. I would go get I didn't use the mumbo sauce. I would just get some, Chinese chicken wings and the hot sauce. And that was good, so those were some of it. And we would always, the McDonald's on Georgia Ave. Oh my goodness. I think they said they're closing it down, but I remember going there. It was 24 hours going to there in snowstorms. We would get out and walk and go to that McDonald's. Yes. So those were some of my favorites.
All right, got two more for you. What is your favorite alumni memory of being a Howard alumni?
Ooh, my favorite alumni memory being a Howard alumni. I think, that's a good question. I think that, I think that this experience, I'll take, that may be cheating, but I will say that this experience is probably going to be one of my favorites, because just seeing so many people from so many HBCUs embrace the book, seeing the community, seeing just the connectivity and the support has been really beautiful. So as an alumni, and then, reaching out to so many people from Roywood Jr. To Branford Marsalis and just going, hey, can you do this book? And them, immediately saying, yeah, I'll do it. I think because these experiences meant so much to them clearly, it meant a lot. I think I'll always remember that.
I know you're not supposed to ask people to pick favorite children, so I won't ask you to do that. No. But I do have to ask you if you have a favorite essay in this book.
A favorite essay. I really love, because these essays were really, they were labors of love for me. Like I really, truly went through each and every single one and really edited each and every single one. I won't say that I have like a favorite because I love all of them. Really, truly. But I do think, and I would recommend, for everyone to read from Leonida Inge. She has a beautiful essay about homecomings and her father. She went to FAMU, and she's a member station host for NPR in North Carolina. And I just think her memories of FAMU over the years, and then her talking about her father's experiences at FAMU, and like that family legacy were just so beautiful, and it really brought tears to my eyes. And I would recommend it. It's called Everyone's Cheering for You. So that's one of the essays I would definitely recommend.
All right, Ayesha, before we move in the question and answer section, I have had the opportunity to read this incredible book cover to cover. Many of these folks have not, so I wonder if you could read a little bit for us from the book.
Yeah, I'll read a little bit. Let me see here. Okay. I'll read from my essay. I'll read a little bit before the end. And this is basically, I had become the editor-in-chief of the Hilltop, and as I talked about earlier, I felt really out of place and felt like I didn't really deserve it, and we'll go from there. Was I really capable of leading people? And what if people didn't like some of my decisions? I was definitely afraid of not making everyone happy. One of the departing seniors, Shani Hilton, who went on to be a very successful journalist, advised me that I should put a little more bass in my voice. What she meant was that I should be more confident in my authority. Professor Yannick Rice Lamb, the faculty advisor to the newspaper and a mentor to me, agreed. I heard the advice, but I couldn't really receive it. My year as editor-in-chief was really full of worry and dread. I faked it, but I never felt I was good enough. While I was worried about whether I could lead, I actually was leading, mistakes and all. I was so concerned about whether I was worthy to hold the role that I missed the blessing of having the role. It's a mistake that I've tried not to repeat. At Howard, I learned what it truly means to come correct. Give your absolute best, not because white people are looking, but because the world will be better for it. I needed to only look to those that came before me to see that. So many people poured so much into me during those years in ways that still resonate and shape me today. I did need to put some more bass in my voice. Now I hope everyone hears me.
Questions, I will just say I am so glad that all of us get to hear you on this book tour, that we get to hear you on our airwaves every Sunday. It is a pleasure to have you here. All right, and this is the fun part where y'all get to take over my job and you get to ask Ayesha all of your burning questions. So I will hand it over to you folks to explain how this works.
Great. We have about 15 minutes for your questions. There's a microphone right on this aisle and a microphone right here. Please come up to the mic. We have people watching at home.
Look at these lines.
I know.
They're ready.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I am a graduate of the Morgan State University.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I said I was debating if I was wearing my hoodie today or not. 21 years ago, graduated. So my son, I think, as you said, the hostess, and I did not catch your name, sis, but I know you say you're knee deep in the whole college process. My son is knee deep. He's a senior at BSA, and he told me 2 years ago that he only wanted to go to an HBCU. And when I tell you, like the mama tears, the bad tears just started, I was like, oh my baby. Yes. So I love that, right? He applied to 7 schools. He's gotten into 6, and we're still waiting. All HBCUs, we're still waiting for the last one, which is Howard, and that's just because he's waiting for his counselor letter. That's it, and I believe he'll get in there too. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the pride, which I feel like is just beaming all over you, what is, I guess, that moment where you just, in the moments where you feel the most pride from saying, I am a graduate, I am an alumnus of an HBCU?
Oh my goodness, I think it's all the time. I mean, well, they say, one of our colleagues at NPR Gene Demby says if someone goes to Howard, they can't go 5 minutes without telling you about it. And I'm okay with that, right? You know, I'm very proud to have gone to Howard because I feel like it shaped my life so much. And I think, you know, and we were very proud, you know, when Kamala Harris, just to have the first vice president, you know, regardless of politics, but to have the first vice president from an HBCU in the White House, I think it's a moment of pride. And I think that there's so many times when I'm talking to someone and I say I went to Howard and their eyes light up, like I've never regretted it. So if you want to talk to your son, I've never regretted it. In all the spaces I've been in, you know, talking to presidents, talking to whoever, I have never regretted going to Howard University. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, Ayesha. I listen to you every Sunday,
Oh,
and
yes.
I played the puzzle this past Sunday, and after I submitted it, I realized I got it wrong, so I'm apologizing for wasting y'all's time.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally, as you submit, it's okay. It's okay.
But I want to say that the way you interview people is so approachable and so likable, and you're just a delight. But
Thank you.
I want to know, I want to know, what is the question that you would like someone to ask you?
Oh, that's a
Ooh,
great
that's a great
thing. That's a
question.
great question that I would like someone to ask me. You know, I like when someone asks, you know, me, you know, how I'm doing.
How are you
And it's
doing?
been, you know, I think, you know, just checking in with me. Like, I think that, you know, I often am, you know, doing the puzzle and doing all these things. And so sometimes I think it might look a little easier than it is, but it's been a journey. And so, you know, I wouldn't mind people checking in on me and asking me what I need, because I need a lot of help. You know, I need childcare, you know what I'm saying?
They can come to my office.
So, but yeah, like I think those sorts of questions. But I also, you know, I love it when anyone asks me about my work, because I love what I do. I love NPR. And so anything like that, I love to talk about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hi there. I'm your homegirl from Durham, North Carolina. Been here in Baltimore 10 years. I am a proud graduate of Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. Yes. For those that don't know, Bennett and Spellman are the only 2 HBCUs for women in the country.
Yes.
So really proud of that. I have less of a question and more of a comment. And that is just to say how proud I am of you. And this compilation that you have pulled together. It's just been wonderful sitting here listening to you. I grew up in Durham, went to Bennett. We followed similar trajectories. I went journalism and communications degrees. My first job was with NPR and then with WUNC, your friendly
yes,
Anita Inge that you just mentioned, who has an essay in the book, and long career in communications and journalism. But it's just so wonderful. And you mentioned this in the beginning of your comments, to see this resurgence of energy around HBCUs. I call it the Kamala Harris effect. You know, we really saw that after she was elected, and just talked about her pride with Howard. I have a godson at Howard Law School now, and it's his first HBCU experience, and he just is in heaven at the Mecca. And so I just want to thank you for putting this together, for giving us all, whether we went to HBCUs or not, reasons to celebrate HBCUs and all that they mean to us as a people, as people of color, as Black folks, but to this country.
Yes.
What a gift
Yes.
HBCUs
Yes.
are.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Hello and thank you. And how are you really?
I'm doing good tonight.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm a great fan every Sunday. Anyway, the question I have has to do with social, such as sororities and fraternities, what the role they play. Because I have friends who've been to and are members of fraternities and sororities. And that has been a major help for them. So maybe you'll write another book about that.
No, I mean sorority, and we definitely have people in this book who are members of sororities and fraternities, and they do absolutely play a very big role in the HBCU experience. Like I said, now I'm not a member of the Divine Nine. Much respect to love to them, but they are absolutely a huge part. And when I was at the Hilltop. Now, I won't say I had the best experience because at the Hilltop, part of the drama was we had all these people who wanted to be in the Divine Nine. And so then we had, all of this drama because people were trying to, kiss up to certain people. And oh my goodness. And then sometimes they didn't like our reporting. And I'm not going to say nothing about the AKAs, but the AKAs they stole our newspapers. They stole the Hilltop. And then, because they didn't like a story that we did, and then they used it in their step show. Used the copies of the step show. Talking about when you talk about us and held up the Hilltop. So it was a lot of drama, but it was a great part of the HBCU experience. So, but yes, it was but they are extremely important, and you can see the effects of that in the book. So yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for coming to Baltimore. I just want to say the work that you do is really paramount to express the excellence of HBCUs, and we really need that. So I really appreciate you doing that. I just wanted to say around about the 1900s, we had about 300 HBCUs, and now we're probably down to about 100. So what can we do so especially our people, Black people, can see the urgency of supporting all the HBCUs now, so that number doesn't diminish in years to come?
I wish I had the perfect answer, but I think, and this may sound a little corny, but I think it's, this is something for all of us to think about and how we can be supportive. Obviously, I feel like this book is a testament to that. And so, if there is a hearing or something like that, this is testimony, right, to why these schools matter and how they have made a difference. But I think that we have to continue to keep it in mind and to push for it. You do see these major donations, $100 million to Spellman, and that's amazing and incredible. But there are so many schools and smaller HBCUs who are really struggling, who don't have the name recognition and aren't getting these multi-million-dollar donations. And I think that they do need support so that they don't fall through the cracks. And then also, the Biden administration has talked about and put out reports on how land grant HBCUs have been chronically underfunded by billions of dollars. That's billions with a B. That's money that they're owed. That's not charity. They have been underfunded. That's an issue, right? And I think that, continuing to keep a spotlight on these issues and continuing to keep that in mind, I think it's so important.
Hi, good evening. So my name is Gerard Allen. I am a graduate of Alabama A&M University.
Oh, yeah.
But I know your Howard story. I'm a Howard brother twice. I'm a Howard uncle 4 times. So
Okay.
But I wanted to say first, thank you for this. I'm an educator in high school. My quest is to visit all 107 HBCUs before I leave this earth. I'm up to 76, so I'm making ground. But I wanted to know, when you're talking with young people, young graduates, 1, 2, 3 years out, what do you share with them as to how to use that HBCU degree to navigate not only forward but also pull others along with them?
Well, I think that part of it is so much that we talked about. First of all, I think there are alumni connections. And not just, like I said, it's not just your personal school that you went to, but I think, trying to reach out to those who are in your field, who maybe went to an HBCU. I think that, I mean, I try to talk to any student, but obviously if you say that, you know, you're from an HBCU, I'm gonna try to talk to you because I've been in your shoes, right? I think also trying to think about making space for others behind you, I do think is so important. And so, you know, when you are in those, because there moments will come where you can say, well, oh, we're looking for someone to fill this position. And you can say, well, have y'all looked at some HBCUs? Like, I know you always go to these colleges, but what about this college? What about Morgan State? You know, what about this, you know, what about FAMU? Like, have you thought about that? I know you do like a lot of companies do all sorts of college outreach and things like that. You could say to your job, have you thought about doing an HBCU tour or an HBCU internship? I think these are sorts of things that companies have been doing. Obviously, you know, since we're getting further and further away from 2020, we see some of those efforts declining. But, you know, I think part of it is trying to keep that pressure and that intention on, and not forgetting about that and not letting these companies forget about that. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for these last two questions here.
Well, first of all, thank you for being you. I think everybody in the room really enjoys your spirit, your freshness, your humor, your positivity. And that's such a wonderful thing, particularly on Sunday mornings. But I want to ask you if you can tell us all a little more about your family. Like, where does that come from? I mean, if you could bottle it and sell it, you'd make a fortune. But where does it come from? You know, your mother, your father, aunts, or uncles? If you could tell us more about your family, that'd be great.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that you know, what I always like to say is that I don't feel like I'm like, because people will wonder, like, are you always happy? I'm not always happy. I feel like I'm actually pretty cynical at times. But I feel like whatever I do, I'm very passionate about it. So I'm not like one of those people who's like tries to be cool. Like, if I like it, I like it. If I don't like it, I don't like it. And I let people know. I'm not too cool to let people know. And so, but I also think as far as my upbringing, I'm a church kid, Church of God in Christ. I came up in a way where the focus was so much on this idea of joy, but it wasn't a joy that was supposed to be based on circumstances. So the idea is that joy, unlike happiness, is not because everything is going well, but it's something that's internal. And it's something that when I look at joy and what I try to bring every Sunday morning in the sense of joy, it's not that everything is perfect. It's not that it's Pollyanna-ish, but it's the idea that we are on this earth, that we are up and you are alive. So we need to make the best of it, right? And so that's what I try to bring to everything, to be real about the hurt, to be real about the pain, but also to be real about those bright moments that we can find and just to try to bring that to everything that I do.
Great. Thank you. And thank you. We appreciate your positivity, particularly during those 4 recent years that we had. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Just an inspiration to meet you as a person studying journalism. When I saw this like 2 weeks ago, I was like, sign me up. And I must say, Fashion 101, slaying with the dress. Gotta say it. Gotta say it. Gotta say that. My question is that if you could touch more on the LGBTQ plus about the homophobia, because that has been a constant narration in the Black community as someone who's openly gay and unapologetically proud. And so I want to know more about that. Has it progressed and gotten better since those incidents that you touched on earlier?
Well, I think that when you read Michael Arsenault's essay, I think what I found so beautiful about it is that he didn't just talk about his experience, that he did broaden it out and talk about incidents that happened when he was at Howard, but also at other schools. But then he also talked about coming back on Howard's campus and going to, it was a dinner in support of the LGBTQ community on Howard's campus. And so he talks about both the optimism, but also the disappointment that some of the issues were still there, but that there had been progress, right? And so I think, and I cannot speak for him, but I think when you read the essay, you get a sense of not despair, but some bittersweet, right? There are still issues. It still isn't easy, as I'm sure you would say, but I think he did feel like there has been some movement and some growth. And so I think there's clearly a ways to go. But I think that his essay, and that's why I say I felt like it was so important. I'm so honored to have it in the book because it talks about that experience.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I want to take this opportunity to thank our moderator for the evening, Juana Summers. And this evening's author, Ayesha Rascoe. So I know Oprah was in the book, and we did a very Oprah thing here at the Pratt. You all got books.
Yes. Everybody gets a book.
Everybody gets a book.
Everybody gets a book.
On behalf of the Pratt Library. So they're all signed. Ayesha signed all of them. So you open up the title page, she signed them hour ago,
Yes.
maybe hour and 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
She is happy to personalize your books in about 5 minutes and take some photos. And so if you'd like to line up outside, Sophia will manage that line. If you don't want to wait, you have a signed book. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.